So this is the new Wahoo KICKR Core Zwift 1, and this takes Wahoo's KICKR Core direct drive bike trainer, but instead of having a traditional cassette, this comes with the Zwift Cog along with the Zwift Click for virtual shifting, and this is a pretty interesting collaboration for a lot of reasons. So last year, Zwift came out with their Zwift Hub 1 trainer, which turned out to be pretty popular, which offered a simple solution when ordering a smart bike trainer where it works with a variety of drivetrains, whether that's 8-speed all the way up to some 12-speed drivetrains. And that allowed it to be more easily used by numerous people in a household with different bikes and different drivetrains. And the virtual shifting component not only provided wider gear ranges for bikes with 1x chainrings, but also provided better gear ratios for bikes with smaller chainrings like mountain bikes. And what this is basically taking the Zwift Hub 1 concept to Wahoo's KICKR Core bike trainer, where at the, core, this is the same KICKR Core that Wahoo's offered for many years, but now, instead of a traditional cassette, it has just one cog, and also comes with Zwift's Click accessory for virtual shifting. Now, whether or not you already own a smart bike trainer, you probably have lots of questions like what's the difference between this and the Zwift Hub 1? And if I already own a KICKR Core, can I upgrade to get the virtual shifting component? And how about Wahoo's other trainers like the Wahoo KICKR V6 and the KICKR Move? And don't worry, we'll get into all those questions later on in the video. So let's go ahead and start out with what this trainer is all about, and this is Wahoo's quite popular entry-level KICKR Core direct drive bike trainer, which provides an interactive experience while riding indoors, where the trainer itself can simulate grades that you experience in indoor training apps like Zwift by dynamically applying resistance. So basically, if you see a hill in the game, the trainer will automatically apply more resistance to replicate what you would feel when you're riding outdoors. And in terms of specs, this is the same as the original KICKR Core, so it can provide up to 1800 watts of resistance, which is a ton by the way. It can simulate up to a 16% grade, so that's going to work for pretty much every grueling climb in Zwift, and also has a claimed power accuracy of plus or minus 2%. And it works with a variety of bikes out there, so this works with road bikes, gravel bikes, mountain bikes, probably commuter bikes as well. And it has compatibility for 130 and 135 quick release axles, as well as 12x142 and 12x148 through axles. And it comes with all those adapters inside the box. It has 3 Bluetooth connections along with ANT+, so this is where you can pair it with your watch, your bike computer, as well as pretty much any indoor cycling training app out there. However, this really is meant to work best with Zwift, considering the collaboration, of course. And we'll talk about a few caveats with using some other indoor cycling training apps here in a bit. Now for the Zwift hardware part of it, instead of a traditional cassette, it has this single cog. So instead of shifting gears with your shifters, it comes with Zwift's Click accessory, which allows for virtual shifting, where you have 24 virtual gears to choose from, and you'll be able to see which gear you're in right in the Zwift game. Now, in terms of the why behind this collaboration, so first off, it makes it a lot easier to order a bike trainer, where this works with the majority of bike drivetrains out there, from 8-speed all the way up to 12-speed drivetrains. And related to that, this also makes it a good option if you live in a household where numerous people ride with different drivetrains, so all you have to do is swap bikes. You don't have to swap cassettes. You may have to swap the axle adapters, but that takes like an extra 10 seconds. And then another advantage is going to be for mountain bikes with smaller chainrings. So what happens with the traditional setup without virtual shifting is that in Zwift, you may actually spin out and not have enough top end since your chainring is so much smaller than a road bike. And how the virtual shifting solves this is that there's a bit of software magic that happens in the background here, where when you first hop on to ride, it automatically figures out the appropriate gear ratio, so you do have enough top end. And the other benefit to this too is going to be for bikes with 1x drivetrains, where with those, you basically have a choice of however many gears that you have in the back. So that's anywhere from 8 to 12 or 13 speeds or something like that. With this, you have 24 virtual gears to choose from, so a lot bigger spread. And then for price, this is going to be the same as the Wahoo KICKR Core. So this is going to be $599, and it also does come with 1 year of Zwift. But again, this is all based around the Wahoo KICKR Core. There's no special free hub or anything like that. The Zwift Cog 1 just replaces the cassette. And the Cog 1 is basically just this plastic outer plate, the Cog itself, which is a 14-tooth cog, and then a plastic inner plate. But underneath it all is a standard Shimano free hub body, and you can still put a traditional cassette on here if you'd like. And there actually is a slight advantage to that, by the way, which we'll talk about here in just one bit. And then for the ride experience, it's basically just like the original KICKR Core, where it works great for simulation rides on Zwift, providing that interactive experience, which makes indoor cycling a more fun experience. It has a 12-pound flywheel, so where this comes into play is being able to simulate the inertia that you would experience outdoors. So think like that momentum that you experience outdoors, a heavier flywheel helps with that experience. And then for stability, the KICKR Core is a nice stable trainer for just riding along. And then with hard sprints, it's pretty stable for the most part as well. What's interesting is that the KICKR Core isn't actually perfectly symmetrical, so if you rock to your drive side, and I mean drastically, it may tilt a little bit, but you seriously have to like really force it over there to do this. Under all normal circumstances, it's just fine. But really the big difference when it comes to the ride experience versus the KICKR Core with the traditional cassette is that instead of using your shifters, you'll be using the Zwift Click accessory, which is this little pod that you attach to your handlebars that has a plus or minus button, one for shifting up and one for shifting down. And it's as simple as that, and you can actually attach the click pretty much anywhere on your bar. So if you tend to ride on your hoods, you can attach it closer to your hoods, but if you tend to ride more on the tops, you can attach it over here, which makes it a bit more convenient. And then you can also use these Zwift Play controllers for the virtual shifting with the outer buttons right here. And what's really cool is that you can actually use both the Zwift Click and the Zwift Play controllers at the same time. So let's say if you ride on the tops right here, you could have the click up here for convenient access right here. And then if you're riding on the hoods, you can use the Play controllers. And then in terms of sound, so this is going to be similar to the KICKR Core with a traditional cassette, but I did find there to be a slight difference. All right, so here is a sound check with the KICKR Core Hub 1. We click in for reference. So the trainer itself is virtually silent, just like the original KICKR Core, but there is a little bit of additional sound that's coming from the Hub 1 component of this. So the cog on the Hub 1, it's made to work with a variety of different drivetrains from like 8 speed to 12 speed. So it's not necessarily an 11 speed cog with an 11 speed chain. So this is going to be slightly louder than what you get on a traditional cassette, and I'll have an example for you here in a second of what a paired cassette sounds like versus the cog. And then the other thing I think I kind of noticed too about the sound is that the plastic components on the cog seem to amplify that sound just a little bit too. I mean, this is still a quiet experience, but it's not going to be quite as silent as what you would get with an actual matched cassette with whatever drivetrain that you have. But still, it's a good virtually silent trainer, but like I said, I think the fact that this is an 11 speed chain with a little bit more generic cog makes it sound just a smidge louder than a perfectly matched cassette. All right, so here's a sound check for you using a standard 11 speed cassette, and you will also notice too that I went ahead and put it into the most optimum gear right in the center of the cassette for the best chain line. So you can probably immediately tell that it's going to be much quieter than the cog. But again, this cassette is made for an 11 speed chain. But here's the thing, is that you don't necessarily need the cog to use the virtual shifting. So you can use your existing cassette if you like, and all you need is to use the Zwift Click accessory or Zwift Play controllers. So this is where you will get a significantly quieter experience if you use a standard cassette. So the sound difference really comes down to the fact that the Zwift Cog, it's kind of more of a generic cog that's meant to work with many different drivetrains, but what works best is going to be an 11-speed chain with an 11-speed cassette or a 9-speed chain with a 9-speed cassette. And here's the thing, the virtual shifting component, well, that has actually nothing to do with the Zwift Cog itself. It really has to do with the Zwift Click controller as well as the Zwift Play and some special software magic in the background. So you can very well use a traditional cassette that's meant for your drivetrain for a little bit smoother experience if you like. And then when it comes to power accuracy, so Wahoo claims a plus or minus 2% power accuracy on the KICKR Core Zwift 1. And it's pretty much delivering on those claims for the most part, where like on these simulation rides, I had rides as close as just 0.3 watts off to rides that were about 4 watts off, but all within spec. So like on this ride here, we're seeing some really good numbers out of the KICKR Core versus the Asioma Duo pedals that I'm using as references. And then on this ride here, again, quite close. And then if we take a look at these sprints, those line up extremely well. Now on this ride here, that was a bit farther off at 4 watts, I did notice a bit of drift on the second half of the ride where it was reporting a bit higher, and this was actually a longer 90-minute ride than those other examples that were only about an hour long. So I did see a little bit of drift over time when the trainer heated up a little bit, but still only a handful of watts difference. So now let's talk about URG mode, where instead of you choosing how much power to apply while riding, the trainer itself is set to a specific power target from a pre-built workout, like this workout from Zwift. So there's a couple things that we want to look for with URG mode. So first off is going to be how stable it is at holding the specific power target, as well as how it transitions from one power target to another. So when it comes to how stable it is at holding power targets, it's really good. And the reason, by the way, why the power from the pedals looks wavy is because it actually is, because that's my legs going slightly over or under. But what's important is that it always evens out and we don't see my power going way over or way under. And then in regards to URG mode responsiveness and transitioning in between intervals, it's very smooth at applying power to each interval. So for instance, here on this set of 30x30s, it's changing power from 140 watts to 325 watts in about 4 seconds or so, which is pretty good. I'd almost prefer it to be just slightly faster at changing the power target, like maybe like 3 seconds or so, but overall, I think it's still a pretty good experience. Okay, so now on to the more burning questions. So I guess first off, why would you want a KICKR Core Zwift 1 versus the Zwift Hub 1 bike trainer, where both of them have a similar price tag and both of them have pretty similar specs for the most part as well? So first off, when it comes to power accuracy, so the KICKR Core just edges out the Zwift Hub 1 in terms of power accuracy, where this is plus or minus 2% and the Zwift Hub 1 is plus or minus 2.5%. And that's definitely what I saw as slightly better accuracy of the KICKR Core versus the Zwift Hub 1. And then another difference is going to be the flywheel. So the KICKR Core has a 12-pound flywheel versus the 10.3-pound flywheel on the Zwift Hub 1. So maybe just a slightly better road feel with the KICKR Core. And then another difference, and this could actually be a big one, is that the KICKR Core is compatible with Wahoo's KICKR Climb accessory, which will physically raise the front end of your bike, which adds to the simulation aspect of riding on hills, in addition to the resistance that's being applied to the trainer. And then for some other differences, the KICKR Core has 3 Bluetooth connections versus just 1 on the Zwift Hub 1. However, the Zwift Hub 1 also does have a heart rate bridge function, as well as a 10 Hz higher transmission race mode. And another question you may have is, should I buy a KICKR Core Zwift 1 or a KICKR Core with a traditional cassette? And I think this comes down to some of those points I was talking about earlier, where this is just a little bit more convenient option where you just have one cog, and this is going to be especially useful in households where there's going to be numerous people with different bikes with different drivetrains. And this also solves a lot of problems surrounding mountain bikes with smaller chainrings, as well as bikes with 1x chain rings. But again, you can use the virtual shifting component with a traditional cassette as long as you have the Zwift Click or the Zwift Play, but this will obviously cost you a little bit extra if you're buying just the KICKR Core with the traditional cassette. However, one reason not to get the KICKR Core Zwift 1 is if you're not going to be spending a lot of time riding on Zwift, because that's really what this whole setup is meant for. So if you're going to be riding on apps like Ruby, let's say, you can't use that virtual shifting aspect because the Zwift Click and the Zwift Play, well, those really only work with Zwift. However, one thing to keep in mind though is that you still can use the KICKR Core Zwift 1 with more URG mode based apps like Trainer Road, because that's not really involving any shifting. That's just going to be applying resistance to the trainer in URG mode. And I've probably already answered this question many times in the video, but for existing KICKR Core owners, you can use the virtual shifting component with the Zwift Click and the Zwift Play by just upgrading the firmware on your KICKR Core to enable the virtual shifting component, and then make sure to go into the settings in Zwift to enable virtual shifting, and there you go. Now, for all of you out there with KICKR V6s, KICKR V5s, or maybe a KICKR Move, is the virtual shifting feature going to be coming to your trainer? Well, I don't have an official word, but it is just a software upgrade that they have to make to those trainers. So I guess what I would say is that it would be hard for me to imagine it not coming to those trainers at some point. Anyhow, that's the new Wahoo KICKR Core Zwift 1. And if you found the information in this video useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below. And if you have any questions about it that I didn't answer in the video, feel free to drop those down in the comment section as well. In the meantime, happy riding, and we will see you in the next video.